Hello, my name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place in the third Sunday of Advent. So what I want to know is, given that reading from Luke, how many of you still have two shirts? That's what John the Baptist wants to know. But as for me, as the poet wrote, I have learned to keep my head while speaking the truth. That's a pun. I dare say there are many other poems. I dare say there are very few other poems about John the Baptist, nor that many sermons about him either. It's kind of like preaching about John Brown, another prophet who came to prepare us but isn't talked about in polite society. Like our prophets in the rearview mirror, after we have had enough distance to pluck the insect wings from their beard and no longer can smell their musk. We clean them up and sanitize them so that we can make national heroes out of them. Another word for it is domestication. If they were alive, we could never get away with domesticating them as we do because they just wouldn't sit still for it. On the other hand, nobody in their right mind wants to be a prophet. Nobody who has other options ever sits around to think to him or herself, I want to grow up and be a prophet. Whereas once upon a time, there were schools of prophets and even professional prophets. It long ago fell out of favor. One generation of amazing prophets included Amos, Micah, Hosea, and Isaiah. And somehow, miraculously really, we still have their poetry. Lo, these 2,700 years later. Decades and decades ago, at the beginning of my ministry, I attended a once vaunted institution now closed called the College of Preachers. It was in the nation's capital, on the grounds of the National Cathedral. 20th century greats like Reinhold Niebuhr taught seminars there. And after initially being an invitation-only program, it came to be more open, even to punks like me. I anxiously drove to Washington, D.C. from Indianapolis, Indiana, with my real sermon text in hand, which we were instructed to bring. So like everybody else, of course, I brought one that I thought was really, really good. The first full day, we delivered our sermons to one another, a group of colleagues all there for the same thing. As I recall, I was one of the youngest in the bunch. I had a sort of longish hair and a big bushy beard, and without a doubt, I was the least refined. The feedback was nearly unanimous. Too harsh, too radical, too angry. You can't get away with talking like that from the pulpit. I was downhearted, of course, but tried to stay open and learn because that's what I came there to do. Somewhere toward the end of that week, the faculty gathered with all of us to watch a video of the retired presiding Bishop John Hines. I had heard of him, but that was about all. Never read or heard him speak or anything. We watched in the video as he ascended this very tall pulpit at the National Cathedral, two canes helping him up the steps very slowly. And in the red and white garb of bishop's robes, he also sported a long beard. At least that's in my mind's eye. I've never actually found a picture of him with a beard, so it probably is my imagination. Anyway, he was older in the video, old actually, and clearly had to hold on to the edges of the pulpit just to remain standing. But his voice boomed. It filled every nook and cranny of that vaulted cave. And as the camera panned the congregation, it was filled with fur coats and Georgetown black suits, sitting there under the hot breath of that lion who preached a wildly prophetic sermon. We were all just blown away at the power of that man's voice and his words and his every demeanor resonating as it did out of a shrunken body that was crumbling in front of us. All around the room there at the College of Preachers, we all commented on the sermon in a kind of hushed, glowing tone. And then one of the faculty members very quietly remarked, "Isn't it funny how Cam said nearly the same things, but he was perceived as an angry young man?" It is a hard reality to learn that age, gender, race, and class are robed in countless presumptions that we cannot get rid of or deny. Neither John the Baptist nor Jesus, both brown men of color adorned in the aura of poverty, would be able to speak to us in our world and our churches because we're still segregated by class and race. We have about as much chance of changing that reality as we do of making a silk purse out of a pig's ear. But you know what? With God, all things are possible. Jesus said that. I didn't make it up. There are more ways than poetry and violent rebellion to be prophetic. Whenever we can offer a witness that could cause other people to stop and wonder, to stop and ask themselves how and why we did that, and have their pondering lead them like ant tracks back to the holy, well, then we're being prophetic. Someone remarked to me this week about how extraordinary the robust quantity of goods and money this small congregation here is able to collect and give away. Indeed, during the pandemic shutdown, we were recognized in the diocese as one of the few congregations that was able to keep our outreach going. In fact, it was then that we really began to accelerate. Now that's not meant as a boast of any kind, just a moment to stop and to recognize that one way to be prophetic in this community or any other community is to have an outsized heart. Like John Hines, many of us are no longer in our best physical condition, and that narrows some of our options. But because of that very fact, how and what we can do is able to boom and resonate our conviction that God, and that with God, all things are possible. I also believe that by choosing to leave our building when we did, which, if you don't know, we left a big Gothic church to come into an old wine bar in downtown. But choosing to leave our building when we did and how we did, and our dogged persistence in the face of that struggle, I think can offer hundreds, if not thousands, of other congregations around the nation a prophetic message of hope. Being prophetic doesn't require us to eat insects or break into armories in pursuit of abolition. We can also be prophetic by living out a cherished value in ways that other people begin to wonder why we did that. In the darkest moments of his generation, Isaiah offered the poetry of hope and restoration. And then, when prosperity had made his contemporaries forget who they were, his poetry turned radical and challenging. What he didn't do was to sit around and fret that no one would notice, and so render him speechless. It's Advent, and after today, we turn the corner toward Christmas. Next week, the stories and images we associate with Christmas begin to leak through the purple curtain. What we need to know is that Christmas itself, the stories we associate with hot cocoa and silent night, are at their core prophetic stories. Well, more about that next week. Peace be with you.